Hello. Going to talk about turn sequences and patron wargaming, different concepts. Just thought I'd see how many people come in here. I did say 7 p.m. It's technically not. How you doing? And you left. Great. According to my YouTube, people came and went already. Oh well. Um, we'll give it a try. Doesn't I'm not really set to start it till 7. So, somebody in there, say hello. I'm gonna give myself the minute here just to see if anybody comes in. I know it's not good etiquette. It doesn't make a good live, but I want to be able to try to talk to somebody. So, jeez, somebody that always does that. That's very too bad. Oh man. All right, I'm gonna give it one more. All right, it is now officially 7 o'clock. I'm gonna start. Let's just give it one more chance here to get some people to come in. Okay. I'm new to streaming, so sometimes I just kind of blow the snap, the false start. But uh, what I wanted to talk about is the BrOsr issues that came out last night. Issues. It was an interesting conversation, really. I just told people that I would start running some of these lives and talk more about it and get it more in depth. A lot of people seem excited, but anyway. Uh, um, First thing uh, was discussing the one for one time thing again, which I've covered a couple of times already. But I don't, I mean, the one for one real time, I think, kind of sets people off and it's a little bit confusing. Some of them believe that, based on that uh, phrase or term or ratio, that you're playing the game all day long, every day, which isn't strictly true. It's just that the ability to make decisions and sometimes play certain offshoots or narrative lines that involve only portions of the entire player group can be done outside of the main face to face or virtual tabletop session that you play, whether it be weekly or monthly or something like that. Um, so that's really where it comes with from that, and uh, it's I I don't know if anybody truly means that they want to play where 1 second of real world time equals 1 second of um, game time or anything like that. But I don't believe that tenable either. What we would do is we would break things up into sections, uh, chunks of time, a morning phase, an an afternoon phase, an evening phase, a night phase, something like that, where there was a series of or a set time, say what 8 hours or 4 hours or 6 hours or whatever seemed like it was uh, worked for the system that we were playing. And then you could do things within that time based on how fast you could move, based on what kind of motivation you had to build fortifications or set up camp or whatever have you. And so you gave your troops and or your party um, orders. You wrote out my band of adventurers will be spending this phase going from this village to this village, something like that. Now, if something happens on the way of that village, you might get a text or message indicating that there may be some decisions to make about what you want to do. If you've got an encounter, um, Do you want to play that now? Do you want to run from the encounter? Do you want to engage? Whatever, things like that. So, with a good referee, you may not even have to do that. They might be able to um, just say, "Hey, do you want to fight?" And then through a couple of discussions, you can make decisions about what weapons you want to use and what attacks you want to make, and you just fight that out via post, so that when it comes time to have the full session, you can say, well, this party was off on their own, or this section of the group went off on their own, and this is what happened. But you weren't witness to it because you being the other people or other players were somewhere else, still sleeping at camp or whatever the case may be. And that's kind of how the umpire educates these, or educates, however you want to pronounce it. I don't think I'm doing a good job, but these multiple party larger campaigns that are talked about with BrOsr. And one of the things in order to facilitate that, this is taken from war games, and it's used in RPGs too. It shouldn't be that unfamiliar. There's the time scale, which is what I just talked about. Then there's the ground scale, which is whether you're an adventurer creating your own map with an old hex book or whatever it is, whether you use tiles. What does one hex equal in ground terms? Just like a map reading. You look at a scale on a map, 1 inch equals 20 miles or whatever. Same thing, one hex equals what? So that gives you an idea of how map scale. So say you've got a cavalry troop that can move 5 miles a day or something like that. If the hex is 2 miles, then you usually would just round it off and say you can move 2 hexes, something like that. That's how you get movement factors in games. It works better than trying to just, let's do what it feels like, because then you got to guess and move around and stuff like that. And you got to play with it. If you just use real world stats, it just makes it easier to design, in my opinion. The next thing is unit scale. And, something like chainmail or battle system, you have troops you might have, miniatures that represent 10 actual troops, but they're only one model because no one can afford, a one-for-one army, as far as. But then you have heroes that might be, just the model representing just the hero. Those are different unit scales. And those are mostly a economic and aesthetic choice as to how many you want to represent, whatever. But so we've covered the three. Those are kind of the three main things that you want to construct in any simulation. A lot of people look at simulation and they say, "Oh no, you're talking about stuff. I just want to play a game." What I'm saying is, you have a world, and what can be done in the world. Can if it's matrix, then the physics of the matrix are very malleable. You'll have to have some way of describing people or giving them players the ability to fly through the air or dodge bullets and stuff like that, or move very fast or something like that. So whereas fantasy, it may be more about just regular gravity, but there's the magic that can entail stuff like that. So one of the things that I think led to a lot of this, and what makes it great, is people were always, back in the 70s and 80s, playing war games. They were looking for ways to make things be real time. We didn't have real time video games or anything like that. And the I go, you go system was interesting, but it always was a little bit shallow. It didn't portray things the way that they would happen realistically, where there's two combatants, doing things simultaneously. You're not really waiting for the guy to come and hack at you, and then you take your hack, and then it all happens at the same time in reality. So there was different attempts to try to um, create as much simultaneity as possible. And one of the ways that it was done early was to shorten the time scale that I talked about earlier, so that just like a frame rate, if your time scale was one turn equals 6 minutes, you know, then you had this. But if your time scale was one turn equals 2 seconds, it was smoother. But the the after effect, or the side effect, or the negative consequences were they started to become rules that people felt were cumbersome. You were doing a lot of procedure and a lot of die rolling only to cover, uh, 5 minutes of a battle. So what happened next was, well, you can't play a company-sized battle with that rule set. It would take all day. So then they started saying, well, you have to have skirmish rules and all that stuff. So it wasn't an ideal solution. There were all sorts of different gimmicks. A lot of things were chit pull. And it wasn't really make anything simultaneous, but it made things less predictable. You didn't know if this guy was going to move this turn or that guy was going to move this turn. What chit pull is different than initiative. It was just a random selection. This was created by, well, at least the first time I read about it, it was used by a man named Donald Featherstone. Featherstone was a war gamer, avid war gamer, and wrote many books in Great Britain. He was also in the Eighth Army and fought Rommel in Africa. And he would have you use a set of playing cards and assign each unit in his army, or the respective armies, a ace of spades or six of clubs or whatever. So when that card was drawn, it was their turn to move. And you never knew. You shuffled the deck every time, and it shuffled things up. But it really didn't make simultaneity. What makes simultaneity is kind of the crux of what the whole BrOsr thing is really about, at least for me, is that if there's an umpire, you can have that kind of simultaneity as long as people are willing to commit to the one for one time. And one for one time is the big conflict, because some people go, oh, you can't do that, or oh, that means playing all the time. No, it just means shooting a guy an email over the week or over the month, whatever time frame you play in between, weekly, monthly, whatever, and having some communication and possibly some short game things occurring outside of the larger session. That's one for one time, the way I use it anyway. So this isn't beer, it's coffee, iced coffee. So, and a lot of this stuff comes from, all this, as people know now, common knowledge, it came out of wargaming. There was a connection. And if you really want to try to understand some of this stuff, geez, man, what a drag. I'm kicking myself because I really thought I would get some people to come in today. Oh, well. But if you really want to make that connection, here's some of the authors that influenced the guys that you're looking. People in OSR or vintage gaming, or whatever term they want to use, or just, people that are getting fed up with labels and go, I just want to learn about the older games for design purposes. The best thing you could do to learn about how these concepts came to be, more about how they work, more about how guys like Gygax and Arneson use them or molded them to RPG, is to read the authors that they undoubtedly read themselves, that influenced them into making this stuff up. And a group that I think I put out a tweet about this last night. There's a guy named Bruce Quarry, and he's an Englishman, He was big into Napoleonics, but he was also big into World War II. Now, he liked things a little more crunchy. He wrote several books. You can look them up. Most of them are available in print. He's one of these guys that if you show his stuff to the wrong people, uh, that are sensitive about everything, they're going to start saying he's this, that, and the other thing. Because um, Corey wrote a lot about the German side of things. And it wasn't because he wanted to goose step. It was because he felt that it was interesting to look at the flip side of the coin. Everybody was talking about Montgomery. Everybody was writing about the British Eighth Army at the time. Everybody was writing about, Second World War from the Allied perspective. And it wasn't it when he wrote the stuff he wrote, it didn't mean you were a Nazi. Now people would say you are because he wrote extensive reference material about Waffen SS units during the war and stuff like that. Just because it was a niche that wasn't being filled at the time. He's not, but he also was a huge Napoleonic guy, and he would give you some of his writing on Napoleonics. You would see how some of those concepts used in Napoleonic wargaming translated into the campaigns played by Gygax and stuff like that. There's other people that are just, I think, just in terms of anybody who's interested in game design of any kind, especially wargaming, of course, but just in general, there's a guy named Charles Grant. He's interesting. There's a man named Tony Bath. He was mentioned by Griff last night. And these are all prominent. So far, I've mentioned British people. Americans, there was a guy named Jack Scrooby. He was one of the, as far as I know, one of the first big miniatures creators. He had his own line of miniatures. And he was big into pewter toy soldiers and creating his own. He was in California and he sold all this stuff out like Ralph Partha stuff years later or whatever. I know Ralph, but another great source of good game design ideas is a guy named Joe Morshauser III. Most of it has to do with wargaming. Not all of it does. Some of it is fantasy, role-playing-ish type games, skirmish games and stuff like that. His stuff is a little bit harder to find, but if you can get a hold of it, I think you'd find a plethora of interesting ideas. Another American, a local boy here in Wisconsin named Gene McCoy. Gene McCoy contributed a lot of interesting things to wargaming. He had a great periodical called Wargamers Digest that ran from like 72 or 73 up into the 80s. Something happened with him financially or something where the where the magazine stopped for a while and then restarted in the late 80s and went on for a while. Both him and I believe his brother at one point was doing the magazine. And Gene had some really interesting ideas. One of the first things that Gary Gygax ever got published was published by Gene in Wargaming Digest. A lot of great information in there, including Gene McCoy's own summary of Kriegspiel. Gene turned those summaries for World War II skirmish rules and Kriegspiel. The summaries were inside the pages of the magazine. That was, I think, bi-monthly. But he became very ill and couldn't complete taking those ideas and consolidating them into rules. He did do it, but then when it was time for him to distribute the material that everybody ordered, he died and nobody kind of took up for him. So for a while, people were upset because they put a lot of money into the thing, and they never got their copies out. And years later, people tracked him down and found out that he just got ill, and he was a one-man band, and when he passed on, he didn't have anybody to do it for him, so it just all kind of fell away. But reading the old Wargamers Digest is a joy and a treasure trove of really interesting material. And you'll find some Gygax stuff in it. Now, at this is 20 minutes, and I'm still trying to get my rhythm and my sea legs and talking, so hopefully I'll get smoother and stuff like that. At this point, I wanted to open it up to forum and discussion. I had several people that said they were interested in this. I'm not complaining. It's hard to get people to see. I can only promote on Twitter. But here's where I was going to have a back and forth. And there's no one here to have a back and forth. So, and I kind of expected that I would have to run this a couple of times in order to people. In fact, I told people, I says, don't worry, I'm going to do it again. So I'll cut it off here, and I'll try again maybe a little bit later. Unfortunately, I won't be as consistent as I thought I'd be, because today some mail showed up at my door, and it's going to disrupt my schedule. I don't know for how long, but I'll try to get up and as much as I can onto the internet and do the series and do these the same talk as many times as I can, so that more and more people can get involved. Now, sure, you can go watch what I've already recorded, but what I feel is as useful, if not more so, is having people in the live discussing things, asking questions, giving their experience, telling about their games. I've spent 6, 7, 8 hours total, if not more, since I started going live, talking about my games, sometimes to nobody, sometimes to a couple of people. I haven't looked at it all, but I might be getting a little repetitious. So I do have, but just for the sake of promotion, I do have several, BrOsr type, or BrOsr, whatever you say, type of games prepared. Now, I was going to play them on stream as part of this series. Hopefully I can do that. Like I said, I just got handed some bad news, and it might take me off the, put me, or more accurately, put me on the bench for a while. But if I can get to it, I'll try to stay online and facilitate these games if you want to participate. If I can't get participants, I will participants. Yikes! I'll play them solo-ish and just try to give you some visual explanation as to how this stuff goes out. So nobody showed up, but that's okay. We'll try again, maybe a little later tonight. See ya.